One man versus an entire German command post, the battle nobody believed. True WW2 story. Private Jack Mercer saw the man next to him drop before he heard the crack of the rifle. 1 second, Corporal Hayes was checking his map. The next, half his skull was gone, spraying the snow red. Jack hit the ground hard, his heart hammering against frozen earth. December 1944. The Ardennes forest. What was supposed to be a quiet sector had just exploded into hell. Welcome to my channel. This is a story you won't believe, but every word is true. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more untold WW2 stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. Death in the trees. Jack pressed his face into the snow, tasting blood that wasn't his. Around him, the rest of 2nd Platoon scattered like rats. Machine gun fire ripped through the pine trees, shredding bark and flesh with equal efficiency. Someone was screaming. Jack couldn't tell who. Contact front. Contact front. Sergeant Donnelly's voice cut through the chaos, but Jack could barely hear it over the ringing in his ears. They'd been marching through this godforsaken forest for 3 days, following orders that made no sense. Reconnaissance, they called it. Check the eastern approach. Report enemy movements. Standard patrol. Except intelligence said the Germans had pulled back weeks ago. Intelligence said this sector was clear. Intelligence was dead wrong. The trap revealed. Jack crawled behind a fallen log, his rifle clutched against his chest. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely work the bolt. 23 years old, 5 months in combat, and he still couldn't stop the fear from flooding his veins like ice water. How many? That was Lieutenant Morrison, somewhere to Jack's left, voice tight with panic poorly disguised as authority. I count 3 machine gun positions. Donnelly shouted back. Maybe more. They've got us in a crossfire. Jack risked a look over the log. The forest ahead looked empty, peaceful almost, just endless rows of snow-covered pines disappearing into morning mist. But he could see the muzzle flashes now, winking like deadly fireflies from positions they'd walked right past. The Germans had let them march straight into the killing zone before opening up. This wasn't a random encounter. This was an ambush. Carefully planned. Perfectly executed. The count. 2nd squad, sound off. Morrison's voice cracked. The responses came in broken gasps. Willis, here. Jackson, hit but mobile. Kowalski, here. Jack waited for Hayes to respond, then remembered Hayes didn't have a face anymore. Mercer. You alive? Here, sir. Jack called back, surprised his voice worked. When the count finished, Jack felt his stomach drop. They'd started the patrol with 18 men. Now they were down to 12. 6 men dead or missing in the first 30 seconds. And the Germans hadn't even started their main assault yet. The impossible choice. We need to fall back. That was Private Willis, voice high with panic. We're sitting ducks here. Fall back where? Donnelly snapped. They've got us boxed in. We go backwards, we hit that ravine. We go forward, we're in the open. Left and right are death traps. Morrison was silent, and Jack knew what that meant. The lieutenant was 25 years old, fresh from officer training, leading his first combat patrol. He'd been given command because all the experienced officers were dead or wounded. Now he was learning the hard way that command meant making choices when every option led to death. Sir, we need orders. Donnelly pressed. What do we? The explosion cut him off. A mortar round hit 20 yards to their right, throwing up a column of frozen earth and shredded pine. Then another. Then 3 more in rapid succession. The Germans were walking mortars across their position, methodically eliminating any cover. Move. Move now. Morrison was screaming. Back to the tree lean. Go. The run. Jack didn't think. He ran. His boots slipped on blood-slicked snow as he sprinted through the trees, branches whipping his face, mortars exploding around him like the fist of an angry god. He saw Jackson take shrapnel to the leg and go down hard. He saw Willis make it 3 steps before a machine gun burst cut him in half. He kept running. 30 yards. 20. 10. He threw himself behind a massive oak tree just as another mortar round obliterated the position he'd occupied seconds before. His lungs burned. His legs trembled. He was alive, but he didn't know for how much longer. The revelation. Everybody here. Morrison's voice came from somewhere close. Jack counted 4 others huddled in the improvised defensive position. 5 men left from 18. The math was brutal and simple. Where's Donnelly? Jack gasped. Dead, Morrison said flatly. Caught a burst crossing the gap. Kowalski? Here, sir. Took one in the shoulder but I can still shoot. Jackson? Silence. Morrison's face was pale, his eyes wide with the realization that he was now in command of a catastrophe. Okay. Okay. We need to. Sir. It was Private Chen, the platoon's radioman, holding up the smoking remains of their radio. It's destroyed. We can't call for support. The words hung in the frozen air like a death sentence. No radio meant no backup. No artillery. No evacuation. They were alone, surrounded, and the Germans knew exactly where they were. The voice in the dark. That's when they heard it. A voice, calling through the trees in perfect English. American soldiers. You are surrounded. You cannot escape. Surrender now and you will be treated according to the Geneva Convention. Resist and you will die. Jack's blood ran cold. The voice was calm, almost friendly, like a teacher addressing schoolchildren. But there was something wrong about it, something that made his skin crawl. Morrison looked at his remaining men. 4 exhausted, terrified soldiers and 1 officer who'd lost 3/4 of his command in 5 minutes. Sir, Chen whispered. What do we do? Before Morrison could answer, Jack saw something that made his heart stop. In the snow 30 yards ahead, barely visible through the morning mist, a line of German soldiers was advancing. Not running. Walking. Rifles ready, moving with the confidence of men who knew they'd already won. But that wasn't what froze Jack's blood. It was the man walking in front of them. Tall, wearing a Wehrmacht officer's uniform, but something about him was wrong. His face was too clean. His uniform too perfect. And he was smiling. Jack had seen that man before. 2 days ago. In the village they'd liberated. Wearing an American uniform. The betrayal. Morrison, Jack hissed. That officer. I know him. He was. The bullet hit Morrison in the chest before Jack could finish. The lieutenant dropped without a sound, blood spreading across the snow in a widening pool. The shot had come from behind them. Jack spun around, raising his rifle, and saw Private Kowalski standing there, smoking pistol in hand, that same wrong smile on his face. Sorry, boys, Kowalski said in a voice that was suddenly, terrifyingly calm. But this patrol was over before it started. He raised the pistol toward Chen. And that's when Jack realized the ambush had been perfect because someone had told the Germans exactly where they'd be, exactly when they'd arrive, and exactly how to kill them all. They'd had a traitor in their ranks. And now only 3 of them were left alive. Kowalski's finger tightened on the trigger, aimed straight at Chen's head. But Jack was already moving. 5 months of combat had taught him one thing: hesitation kills. He threw himself sideways, slamming into Chen and knocking him out of the line of fire just as Kowalski's pistol barked. The bullet took Private Davis through the throat instead. Davis had been crouched behind a tree, hadn't even seen the betrayal coming. He clutched his neck, blood pumping between his fingers, eyes wide with shock and confusion. He was dead in seconds. "You son of a..." Chen started to raise his rifle, but Kowalski was faster. Another shot, and Chen's rifle exploded in his hands, the round striking the receiver and sending shrapnel into his face. Chen screamed, dropping the useless weapon and clutching his bleeding eyes. Jack rolled behind a tree, his own rifle coming up, finger on the trigger. But Kowalski was already running, crashing through the underbrush toward the German lines, shouting in perfect German. "Two left. Finish them. Alone in hell." Jack grabbed Chen by the collar and dragged him deeper into the trees, away from the advancing Germans. Chen was moaning, blood streaming down his face, hands pressed against his eyes. Jack didn't know if he could see. Didn't have time to check. Machine gun fire chewed up the ground behind them. Mortars started falling again, closer now, the Germans adjusting their aim with deadly precision. Jack's mind raced. 2 men. No radio. No support. Surrounded by an entire German company, and now they knew exactly where to find him. The tactical situation wasn't just bad. It was hopeless. But Jack had learned something else in 5 months of combat: hopeless didn't mean over. Not yet. The question. He pulled Chen into a shallow ravine, pressed them both against the frozen earth as mortars screamed overhead. Chen was gasping, trying to speak through the pain. "Can you see?" Jack demanded. "One eye," Chen choked out. "Left one's gone. Right one's blurry. Shrapnel. Can you shoot?" I don't know. Maybe." "Jack, what the hell just happened?" Kowalski was a spy. German plant. Probably been feeding them information for weeks. Jack's mind was working furiously, puzzle pieces clicking into place. That's why every patrol we've run has walked into trouble. That's why intelligence keeps being wrong. Someone's been telling the Germans our every move. But why not just kill us back at camp? Why wait until now? Jack didn't have an answer. Then he did, and it made his blood run colder than the December snow. "Because we're bait," he whispered. "Think about it. 18 men go missing in a quiet sector. Command sends search parties. Maybe a whole company. The Germans ambush them too. Keep doing it until they've bled us dry." Chen's one good eye widened. "We have to warn them. We have to." "With what radio?" Jack snapped. Then he forced himself to breathe, to think. "But you're right. If we die here, the rest of the battalion walks into the same trap tomorrow." The plan. The German voices were getting closer. Jack could hear them calling to each other, coordinating their search. They were thorough, professional, taking their time. Why rush? Their prey wasn't going anywhere. "Here's what we do," Jack said quietly. "The river. You remember the river we crossed 2 clicks back?" Chen nodded weakly. "The Amblev." "Yeah. So that's our way out. We get to the river, follow it downstream. It'll take us back toward our lines. Maybe 10 kilometers. We move at night, hide during day. It's our only shot. 10 kilometers through German-occupied forest with me half-blind and you alone." Chen's laugh was bitter. "That's not a plan. That's suicide. You got a better idea?" Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then he shook his head. No, I don't." "Then we move. Now. Before they tighten the noose." The escape. They crawled. Slowly, painfully, through frozen mud and snow, keeping low, moving only when the mortar fire paused. Jack led, Chen following, one hand on Jack's boot, using him as a guide. Every few minutes they'd freeze, pressing themselves flat as German search parties moved past, so close Jack could hear them breathing. Once, a German soldier stepped within 3 feet of their hiding spot, his boot actually touching Jack's shoulder. Jack held his breath, finger on his rifle trigger, knowing that if he fired he'd give away their position and they'd both die. The German paused, looked around, then moved on. Jack's heart was hammering so hard he was sure the enemy could hear it. They kept crawling. An hour passed. Then 2. The German voices faded behind them, replaced by the eerie silence of the forest. Jack's hands were numb, his knees screaming with pain, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Chen was making small sounds of agony with every movement, but he kept going too. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jack heard it, the rush of water. The river. The Amblev was 30 feet wide, dark and fast-moving, chunks of ice floating on its surface. Jack stared at it and felt his hope die. The water looked cold enough to kill in minutes. And they'd have to follow it for 10 kilometers. "We'll freeze to death," Chen said, voicing Jack's thoughts. "Maybe. But if we stay here, we definitely die. The Germans will sweep this whole area by nightfall." "Jack, I can barely see." "I can't." "You can. You will." Jack grabbed Chen's shoulder, forced the man to look at him with his one good eye. "Listen to me. We're going to make it. We're going to get back to our lines. We're going to warn the battalion. And then we're going to hunt down every last German who was part of this ambush. You hear me? We're not done. Not yet." Chen stared at him for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Okay. Okay. What do we do?" "The crossing." They didn't cross the river. Too dangerous, too exposed. Instead, they followed it downstream, staying in the tree line, using the sound of rushing water to mask their movement. The going was slow, treacherous. The riverbank was steep and slippery, the ground uneven. Chen fell twice, barely catching himself before sliding into the freezing water. Darkness came early in December. By 1600 hours, the forest was pitch black. Jack kept moving, one hand on a tree, the other gripping Chen's arm, feeling his way forward more than seeing. Every sound made him freeze, the crack of a branch, the distant rumble of engines, the occasional burst of gunfire far behind them. They'd been moving for 6 hours when they found the body. The discovery. It was lying face down in the snow, half hidden by undergrowth. American uniform. Jack rolled it over, and his stomach clenched. Private Willis. The kid who'd panicked during the ambush, who'd tried to run. Half his body was missing, torn apart by machine gun fire. But that wasn't what made Jack's blood run cold. Willis's pockets had been turned inside out. His dog tags were gone. His weapon was gone. And someone had carved something into his forehead with a knife. A single word in German, Verräter. Traitor. The realization. "They think we're all spies," Jack whispered. "They think the whole platoon was compromised." Chen stared at the body with his one good eye. But why? Why would they? Because that's what Kowalski told them. Think about it. He feeds them information, leads us into an ambush, then tells his German friends that we're all traitors, all enemy agents. That way, even if some of us escape, even if we make it back to our lines, nobody will believe us. We'll be arrested, interrogated, maybe even executed as spies ourselves. That's brilliant," Chen breathed. "And completely insane." "Yeah." Jack stood up, his mind racing. "Which means getting back to our lines isn't enough anymore. We need proof. Evidence that Kowalski was the traitor, not us. Otherwise, we're dead men even if we survive. Where the hell are we supposed to find that?" Jack thought about it. Then he remembered something. During the ambush, Kowalski had been shouting in German. Not just random words. Specific phrases. Commands. Like he'd been coordinating with the enemy. There'd been other Americans captured in this sector over the past month. Intel had assumed they were killed or sent to POW camps. But what if they were still here? What if the Germans were holding them somewhere close, using them for something? We need to find the German command post, Jack said. Chen stared at him. Are you out of your mind? We can barely walk. You want to raid a German CP? I want to find out what they're planning. Find out what Kowalski told them. Maybe find evidence that proves we're not the traitors. Jack paused. And maybe, if we're lucky, we find out where they're keeping our guys. The choice. Chen was quiet for a long time. Then he laughed, a harsh, broken sound. You know what? Fine. We're dead anyway, right? Might as well die doing something useful. That's the spirit. Don't patronize me, Mercer. I'm only doing this because I want to put a bullet in Kowalski's skull before I die. Fair enough. They kept moving, following the river, watching for signs of German activity. Jack's plan was insane, he knew that. 2 half-dead American soldiers hunting for a German command post in the middle of enemy territory. It was the kind of thing that got you killed. But staying alive wasn't the mission anymore. The mission was making sure their deaths meant something. The light. They saw it around 2,100 hours. A faint glow through the trees, maybe a kilometer ahead. Not a campfire. Too steady, too bright. Electric lights. Which meant generators. Which meant a permanent installation. Jack and Chen moved closer, dropping to their bellies, crawling through frozen mud. The glow resolved into a cluster of buildings, a small farm complex, requisitioned by the Germans. 3 buildings, surrounded by sentries, vehicles parked in the yard. Jack counted at least 20 soldiers visible, probably more inside. And in the center of the compound, lit by harsh electric lights, was a flagpole flying the Nazi flag. They'd found it. The German forward command post. Now what? Chen whispered. Jack was about to answer when he saw something that made him freeze. Walking across the compound, laughing with a German officer, was Kowalski. But he wasn't alone. Walking beside him, very much alive and apparently very comfortable, were 2 other men Jack recognized. Lieutenant Morrison. And Sergeant Donnelly. The men he'd watched die. Except they hadn't died at all. The truth. Oh God, Chen breathed beside him. They're all spies, Jack finished. His voice sounded hollow, distant. The whole command structure. Morrison, Donnelly, Kowalski. All of them. Working for the Germans. Which meant the ambush had been designed to do more than just kill American soldiers. It had been designed to eliminate anyone who might figure out the truth. Anyone who might realize that the Germans had infiltrated American units at the command level. Anyone like Jack and Chen. And if Morrison and Donnelly were alive, if they were working with the Germans, then they knew Jack and Chen had escaped. They'd be hunting for them right now. Hunting with the full resources of both the German army and whatever intelligence network they represented. We need to go, Chen hissed. Right now. Before they. The rifle bolt clicked directly behind Jack's head. Stand up slowly, American. Hands where I can see them. The voice spoke perfect English with a slight German accent. Jack's heart sank. They'd been so focused on the compound they hadn't seen the patrol behind them. He raised his hands slowly and stood. Chen did the same beside him, his one good eye wide with terror. There were 4 German soldiers surrounding them. And standing behind them, smiling that same wrong smile, was Kowalski. Hello, boys, Kowalski said cheerfully. Miss me? They dragged Jack and Chen into the farmhouse compound with rifle butts and German curses. Jack's face hit the frozen mud twice before they hauled him up the steps and threw him into a room that smelled of cabbage and diesel fuel. Chen landed beside him with a groan. The door slammed shut. They were alone. For exactly 30 seconds. When it opened again, Lieutenant Morrison walked in. Except he wasn't Lieutenant Morrison anymore. He wore a Wehrmacht intelligence officer's uniform, complete with insignia Jack didn't recognize. Behind him came Donnelly, also in German uniform, and Kowalski, still wearing his blood-spattered American private's uniform like some kind of sick trophy. Mercer. Morrison, or whatever his real name was, shook his head with mock disappointment. You just couldn't die properly, could you? Had to go and make this complicated. Jack said nothing. His mind was racing, calculating distances, counting weapons. 4 guards outside the door, he'd seen. 3 traitors in the room. His hands were tied behind his back. Chen was barely conscious beside him. The tactical situation hadn't improved. Not going to ask how. Morrison pulled up a chair, sitting backward on it, arms crossed over the back. No dramatic "why did you betray your country" speech. No moral outrage. I'm almost disappointed. You're aware, Jack said quietly. German intelligence. How long have you been in place? Morrison's eyebrows rose. Smart boy. Longer than you'd believe. Morrison was a real person once. Died in a training accident in Georgia, 1943. I stepped into his identity 3 days later. By the time anyone could verify my credentials, I was already in the European theater. Amazing what a perfect accent and the right paperwork can accomplish. The reveal. Donnelly, no, not Donnelly, Jack had to stop thinking of them by their stolen names, laughed. We've been bleeding the American Army dry for 6 months. Every 3rd patrol that goes missing. Us. Every ambush your intelligence can't explain. Us. We've killed more Americans than a whole panzer division. And you're going to keep doing it, Jack said, understanding dawning. You let us see you alive. You could have just shot us in the forest. But you brought us here instead. Why? Morrison's smile widened. Because you're going to help us kill even more Americans. See, tomorrow morning, your battalion is sending a relief force to find our missing patrol. 3 companies. Nearly 300 men. They'll walk straight into the largest ambush we've arranged yet. Unless someone warns them, Jack said. Unless someone warns them, Morrison agreed. Which is where you come in. You're going to radio your command. Tell them you and Chen survived. Tell them the Germans have pulled back from this sector. Tell them it's safe to advance with full force. I'll die first. No, Mercer. You'll die second. Morrison nodded to Kowalski. Chen dies first. Slowly. While you listen. Then you die. Unless, of course, you make that radio call. Chen lifted his head, his one good eye focusing on Morrison with pure hatred. Go to hell. The torture. They started with Chen's fingers. Kowalski had a pair of pliers and a knife, and he knew how to use them. Jack was forced to watch, tied to a chair, as they broke Chen's fingers one by one, asking Jack after each snap, "Ready to make that call yet?" Jack said nothing. Chen screamed, but he didn't break. Not when they broke his fingers. Not when they moved to his toes. Not when Kowalski heated the knife over a lamp and pressed it against Chen's remaining good eye. Chen passed out after the 4th finger. They threw water on him to wake him up. Started again. Jack's mind had gone to a cold, dark place beyond rage. He wasn't thinking about rescue anymore. Wasn't thinking about survival. He was thinking about one thing: how to kill everyone in this room before they killed him. You know what's fascinating? Morrison said conversationally, watching Kowalski work. Pain doesn't really make people talk. Fear does. Watching someone else suffer. That's what breaks men. How much longer can you last, Mercer? How many more pieces of chin before you crack? Forever, Jack said, and meant it. Morrison studied him for a long moment. Then he sighed. You actually mean that, don't you? Damn. I was hoping this would be easier. He pulled out his pistol and shot Chen in the head. The rage. The sound was impossibly loud in the small room. Chen's body slumped in the chair, blood and brain matter spraying across the floor. Jack's ears were ringing. His vision had gone red at the edges. Chen was dead. The radio man who'd stayed conscious through torture. Who'd crawled 10 kilometers with one eye destroyed. Who'd made jokes even when they were surrounded and hopeless. Dead. Because of these men wearing stolen faces. Now then, Morrison said, turning the pistol toward Jack. Let's try this differently. You make the radio call, or I start shooting pieces off you. And Mercer? I'm a very good shot. I can keep you alive and screaming for hours. Jack looked up at him. And he smiled. Morrison frowned. What's funny? You made a mistake, Jack said quietly. What mistake? You told me your whole plan. The ambush tomorrow. 3 companies. The largest trap you've arranged. You told me everything. So. You're about to be dead. What does it matter? It matters, Jack said, because I'm not going to die here. The gambit. What happened next took 3 seconds. Jack had been working his hands against the rope while they tortured Chen. The knots had loosened, not much, but enough. He'd felt one of them slip during Chen's final scream. Now, as Morrison raised the pistol, Jack twisted his wrists hard, feeling skin tear, not caring. The rope slipped. His right hand came free. He grabbed the chair he was sitting on and threw it at Morrison's face. Morrison fired, but the shot went wild as the chair crashed into him. Jack was already moving, diving sideways as Kowalski and the other traitor grabbed for their weapons. Jack's shoulder hit the desk, scattering papers and a lamp. His hand closed around something heavy, a metal inkwell. He threw it at the light bulb overhead. The room plunged into darkness. Chaos erupted. Someone was shouting in German. Gunfire strobed in the blackness, once, twice, 3 times. Jack rolled under the desk, felt bullets punch through wood inches from his head. His hand found something else, Chen's boot. And tucked into that boot, something Chen had grabbed during their escape. A German stick grenade. Stolen from a dead soldier. Jack pulled the pin with his teeth. Grenade, someone screamed. Jack threw it blindly toward where Morrison's voice had been, then crashed through the window behind the desk, glass tearing his face and hands. He hit the ground outside, rolled, came up running. Behind him, the grenade exploded. The escape. The farmhouse erupted in flames and confusion. German soldiers were running everywhere, some toward the explosion, others away from it. Jack sprinted into the darkness, his mind clear, focused on one thing, survival. He made it 20 yards before the gunfire started. Bullets snapped past his head, kicked up dirt around his feet. He zigzagged, running low, using every combat lesson he'd ever learned. The tree line was ahead, 30 yards, 20, 10. Something hit him in the back, hard. He stumbled, fell, rolled. His hand came away wet. He'd been shot. He didn't know how badly. Didn't matter. He crawled the last 5 yards into the trees and kept going. Behind him, he could hear Morrison shouting orders. Find him. He can't have gone far. He's wounded. Use the dogs. Dogs. They had dogs. Jack ran faster. The river again. He made it back to the Amblev through sheer will. His back was on fire, blood running down his legs, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. He could hear the dogs baying behind him, getting closer. The river was black and fast and looked like death, but Jack didn't hesitate. He threw himself in. The cold hit him like a hammer. Every nerve in his body screamed. His wound felt like someone was pressing a hot iron against his spine. He went under, came up gasping, let the current take him. The dogs reached the riverbank seconds later. He could hear them barking, frustrated, unable to follow his scent across water. German voices shouted. Someone fired into the water, but the bullets went wide. Jack let the current carry him downstream, struggling to keep his head above water, his wounded back screaming with every movement. He didn't know how long he floated. Minutes. Hours. Time had lost all meaning. He only knew that he was alive. And he had to stay that way. The truth returns. Jack washed up on a sandbar 3 kilometers downstream. He crawled out of the water, his body shaking uncontrollably, hypothermia setting in. The bullet wound in his back was still bleeding, but slower now. He pressed snow against it, trying to stop the flow. He had to think. Had to plan. Morrison had told him everything, 3 companies advancing tomorrow morning into an ambush. The largest trap the Germans had set. Jack had to warn them. Had to get back to American lines. Had to tell someone, anyone, that Morrison, Donnelly, and Kowalski were German spies, that the entire command structure was compromised, that hundreds of men were about to die. But who would believe him? A private, wounded, his entire platoon dead, claiming his commanding officers were enemy agents? They'd think he was shell-shocked. Delusional. They'd throw him in a cell while they investigated. And by the time they realized he was telling the truth, 300 men would be dead. Unless he went back. The decision. The idea was insane. Suicidal. Impossible. Jack was going back to the German compound. Not to escape. Not to survive. To finish this. To kill Morrison and his network of spies before they could spring their trap. To destroy their radio so they couldn't coordinate the ambush. To burn their intelligence files so the Americans would know what they'd been planning. 1 wounded private against an entire German command post. The odds were laughably bad. But Jack had learned something in 5 months of combat, something the last 12 hours had proven beyond doubt. Sometimes the only way to win was to do something so crazy the enemy would never see it coming. He checked his wounds. The bleeding had slowed. He could move. Barely. He checked his weapons. Nothing. He'd lost his rifle in the river. No grenades. No knife. He had his hands and his rage and nothing else. It would have to be enough. The return. Jack made it back to the compound at 0200 hours. The Germans had doubled their sentries, expecting another escape attempt. They were watching the perimeter, rifles ready, alert for any threat from outside. They weren't expecting someone to come back. Jack approached from the riverside, crawling through frozen mud, using shadows and patience. It took him an hour to cross the last 100 yards. Every movement was agony. His back wound had reopened, leaving a trail of blood in the snow. He didn't care. He reached the first sentry at 0245. The man was standing near a generator shed, smoking a cigarette, rifle slung over his shoulder. Jack came up behind him, moving like a ghost. The sentry never saw it coming. Jack's hands closed around the man's throat. The German tried to scream, but Jack's grip was iron, fueled by rage and desperation. They struggled for 15 seconds. Then the sentry went limp. Jack took his weapons, a rifle, 2 grenades, a knife. He felt almost whole again. The second sentry died the same way. So did the third. Jack made it to the farmhouse at 0315. The building was dark except for one room on the second floor where light spilled from a window. Morrison's command center. Where they'd coordinate tomorrow's ambush. Jack pulled the pins on both grenades. The fire. The grenades went through the window simultaneously. Jack was already running before they exploded. The blast tore through the second floor, setting fire to documents and maps and communications equipment. Secondary explosions followed as ammunition cooked off. Chaos erupted. German soldiers poured out of buildings, shouting, firing blindly. Jack was in the middle of them, wearing a dead German's helmet, moving with purpose. In the confusion, no one questioned him. He made it to the radio tent. One guard inside, already running toward the farmhouse fire. Jack shot him twice, then smashed the radio equipment with his rifle, but methodical, thorough. When he was done, nothing remained but sparking wreckage. They couldn't coordinate the ambush now. Couldn't call in reinforcements. Couldn't warn their forward units. The Americans would advance tomorrow into what they thought was an ambush. But without coordination, without radio communication, the German trap would fall apart. Maybe enough Americans would survive to make it matter. The last target. Jack was turning to leave when he saw them, Morrison and Kowalski, running from a barracks building, shouting orders. Morrison's face was burned from the grenade blast, half his uniform scorched. But he was alive. And he saw Jack. For one frozen moment, they stared at each other across the burning compound. Recognition flared in Morrison's eyes. Then rage. "You!" Morrison screamed. He raised his pistol. Jack raised his rifle. They fired simultaneously. Morrison's bullet hit Jack in the left shoulder, spinning him around. Jack's bullet hit Morrison in the chest, punching through his stolen American uniform and the German one underneath. Morrison dropped. Kowalski was raising his own weapon when Jack's second shot took him through the forehead. He fell without a sound. Jack stood there, swaying, blood running from 2 wounds now, watching the 2 spies die. He'd done it. Against impossible odds. Against every tactical calculation. He'd destroyed their network, their communications, their ambush. And he was still alive. For about 5 more seconds. The end. Continue 12:12. The German soldiers had found him. 20 rifles pointed at his chest. An officer was shouting for him to drop his weapon. To surrender. Jack looked at them and smiled. He'd won. Chen's death had been avenged. The ambush was stopped. The Americans would survive. He raised his rifle. 20 rifles fired as one. Jack Mercer died standing up, rifle in his hands, smile on his face. The Americans advanced the next morning at 0600 hours. They found the German positions in disarray, communications cut, command structure destroyed. The ambush that should have killed 300 men never materialized. The Germans retreated in confusion. The battalion took minimal casualties, 4 dead, 7 wounded. They found Jack's body 2 days later, surrounded by shell casings and blood. They found Chen's body in the burned farmhouse, along with 3 men in American uniforms who died German. They found Morrison's intelligence files, partially burned but still readable, documenting 6 months of infiltration and sabotage. They found everything Jack had died to show them. Private Jack Mercer received the Medal of Honor posthumously. The citation read, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty." But that wasn't the real story. The real story was simpler: one soldier, wounded and alone, refusing to quit until the mission was done. That's not heroism in the movies. That's heroism in war.